And good morning, everyone. 44b, Mem Dalet Amud Beis. Sorry. I did. I started the fire. Okay, fine. Mem Dalet Amud Beis. So, we're talking about, the last thing we spoke about was when you have individuals who are lined up making a wall, they could be used as a wall as long as they are not cognizant of it, right? If they are doing it midas, if they're doing it knowingly, then that is going to be a problem. So says the Gemara again, 40...
Don't they always know they're doing what? I mean, you talked about this guy who was sort of stuck in the middle of nowhere and they built a wall.
Right.
They knew they were building a wall.
No, so not necessarily. We'll see two stories, which I think will shed some light on this. So 44b1, Mem Dalet Amud Beis. Let's see. So Hanu b'nei Ginana, they were the members of a wedding party. Da'ilu Maya b'mechitza shel b'nei Adam, who carried water from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Yachid with the use of a human partition. Okay, so basically here you have a group of people. They are having a wedding. Keep in mind, weddings back in the day were typically started right before Shabbos. They would go into Shabbos. So you have this whole wedding party, and they want to bring water. And so what do? They go ahead and they make this human shield. So Nagdina Shmuel flogged them. He went ahead and he whipped them. Back in the day, the Beis Din had much more jurisdiction than it does today. And if people were violating things in a blatant fashion, or the Beis Din felt that things were getting out of hand, they were empowered to go ahead and give someone makos. Amar, he said, Im Amru Shalomi Das, Yomru Ladas. If Chazal, if our sages said it could be done when people are not aware of their function, do you want to say that's permitted when people are aware? In other words, over there, they were doing it deliberately. They're like, oh, hey, we need more water for this party. We ran out of water, right? So they go ahead and they want to bring more water from outside. They say, no problem. We have a big group of people. Everyone line up now. Everyone makes their little thing, and they bring it in. That's certainly a case of midas. That's certainly a case where they're knowledgeable, and therefore Shmuel went ahead and was very careful, very strict against them. However, here's another story. There were leather flasks that belonged to Rava. They were left in the square of the town of Mechuzah on Shabbos. Okay, so basically here we have a situation which this is not, right? Sorry, I also want to clarify. The case above wasn't a tchum case, right? There are two scenarios where having a partition could be helpful. One is tchum. One is it's outside the tchum, you can bring it into the tchum. Now this wedding party could not have been all walked outside the tchum to help bring water in, right? That wouldn't work. You can't go past your tchum. So there's two things where partitions would be helpful. One is if you have a partition, and it's part of the tchum area, then you're allowed to walk back and forth within it. The other is if you want to bring something from a public domain to a private domain, if all of a sudden there are walls around it, guess what? It's now a private domain. Right? So that was the case above. The case above with the wedding party, they had the water flasks, meaning whatever they deliver the water, outside the homes, and therefore this person wanted to go ahead and bring some water, so they go ahead and they make this thing that Shmuel beat them for. He gave them makas for. However, now we have a case where Rava's walking back home from the base medrash. He's walking back home from his lecture. He's surrounded by his people. Right, his people are surrounding him, and they're walking through from the base medrash to his house. They walk through the public square, and guess what? In the public square, Rava had left some leather flasks. Right, leather flasks were the typical, that was the Stanleys of the day. That's how you stored things in a way that kept everything cold or warm, whatever it is. That's what they did. Okay, so Alinu niale. So as he walked by, Rava whispers to his attendants, and he says, "Pick up the stuff." Okay, pick up the stuff. Why? Because this is the case, to your question before. They're all walking. Why are they walking? They're walking to hak the rabbi, right? They're walking to chat with him, ask him questions. So he just gave a share, etc., etc. But guess what? They're all surrounding a large space now. That's a human, partition, right? And therefore, in that case, he turns to his attendant and he says, pick up the stuff. Because now we can get it, because we now have a wall creating a moving Rosh Hashanah. However, l'shabta achriti, the next Shabbos, bayalinu, Rava's attendants again said, hey, Rava, can we pick up your stuff? V'asr lahu, he said, don't do it. Tahavile kiladas v'asr. It was as if it was the people are being aware, and he's therefore said it's prohibited. The first person saying, what do you mean as if it was aware? As if the people were aware? He says, the truth is, most people did not recognize it. His attendants were very smooth. They picked it up in a way that no one really recognized. But he was afraid that if we keep on doing this, people are going to catch on. And then you're going to come to a situation where people are not going to be able to distinguish between doing it midas, not midas, and again, if the people are aware, then there's a concern that it loses the whole status. So one time, yes, with no one cognizant of it, but to do it a second time, it's too much. Okay, fine. One more story. Levi Ilu Tivna. Levi brought straw from the Rishus Rabbim using human partitions. Again, Levi being, presumably a similar case to that of Rava, where he's surrounded by his followers, students, and he wants to bring some straw. He tells his attendants to carry them. Zeiri Aspasta, Zeiri brought fodder. In the same method, Rav Shimon Bar Chia, Rav Shimon Bar Chia brought water. Okay, so basically, you have stories where they're using these human human walls. But again, it has to be done in a way where people are not so cognizant of it. It's not such a common case, right? It'd be very hard, Jesse, to your point, it'd be extremely hard practically, to do this, right? In other words, you really have to have a scenario where people, it could be, I mean, first of all, thank God we live in a place with the Eruv, so it usually doesn't come up. But in theory, if you have a case where there was no Eruv, the Eruv was down, and you had a group of people walking, and they were all not aware of what's going on, and you smoothly just picked something up, and you kept on being surrounded by those people, that would work. That would work because they are a wall around you. Okay, this next Mishnah has a very, very relevant and fascinating halacha, which we're only going to scratch the surface today, and tomorrow we're going to get into more detail. So bear with me, but it starts before we get to see the Mishnah. We have to learn halacha. So we know we can't go past the tchum. Okay, that's understood. However, in Masechtas Rosh Hashanah we speak about the following, and that is to create to establish a new month. To establish a new month in halacha, back in the day, before we had a calendar, it would have to be cited by two people. Two people would have to go ahead, and two men would have to cite the moon. They'd have to go to Yerushalayim and testify. And then you know about the new moon. The question is, let's say two people see it on Shabbos. Now, the sighting of the new moon and the impact is tremendous. It's tremendous, so much so that Chazal came along and said, on Shabbos you could travel. If you saw the new moon, and you were in Tzfat, and maybe only in Tzfat, you're able to see it. No one knows if people in Yerushalayim saw it. And so you're allowed to travel all the way to Yerushalayim to go tell Beis Din, to go tell the Sanhedrin that there is a new moon, and it's permitted. It's permitted. You're allowed. Tchum, which is, according to many rabbinic, would not apply. Okay? The question then is, what happens? So if you leave your tchum, what do we say? Once you realize you're past the tchum, typically you only have 4 amos, right? However, there's a concern. There's this general concern. If we're sending people to go talk about the new moon, and they say to themselves, okay, I have my family in Tzfat, and now I'm going to go travel all the way to Yerushalayim. It's a long trip, and I'm going to get there, and not only am I going to get there, and I'm going to be stuck, because all I can walk is 4 amos. That means I have like 8 feet. I'm just like kind of stuck there. That's ridiculous. I don't want to do it. So Rabbi Gamliel said, okay, not only are you allowed to go past the tchum, but when you arrive, after you finish testifying, or even if you get there and you find out that you weren't even needed, right? Because sometimes you come and you find out on the way, or when you get there, oh yeah, we already established a new moon, right? Because keep in mind, communication is pretty lousy. Nonetheless, you have an extra, you had just established a new tchum, you have 2,000 amos now. Okay? Why? Because again, we're concerned if we don't give the person extra 2,000 amos, as if they have a new tchum, the person may not travel along. Okay? Now, that same leniency of giving the person 2,000 amos was applied or extended to other cases where a person is traveling for very important purposes, like life-saving purposes. So, for example, let's say a person is on a Hatzalah call, and they are going to go past the tchum. Okay? Now, practically, it's not really going to happen too often because Hatzalah actually has very clear lines in terms of how far they could go for practical reasons, understandable reasons, and they will not go past the tchum. But let's just say, in theory, a person is EMT or whatever it is, emergency call, and they go past the tchum. So if it's for emergency reason, we're concerned. If we tell the guy, you're only going to now have 4 amos where you land, so you go, the person saves the life, and now they have 4 amos. Now, no one's a terrible person, but we understand that in the back of their mind, they may cause them some hesitancy about traveling. So therefore, the permission was extended, leniency was extended, that if a person travels for a similarly important reason, then you'd also be allowed, you now have 2,000 amos of your own. This same principle is going to have ramifications for going on a Hatzalah call in general, right? If you are on Hatzalah and you travel, so going for Pikuach Nefesh, right? If you could save someone's life and you get a call on Shabbos to save someone's life, of course you're allowed to travel. But now you're stuck. Now you're at Sinai Hospital, and you live on You live in Owings Mills or whatever it is. You live on Yeshiva Lane, right? So are you stuck at Sinai Hospital for the rest of Shabbos? Short answer is no. But the beginning of that discussion is this Mishnah, right? In other words, the only reason you're able to, we're going to see there's some leniencies, but those leniencies begin based on this principle, that if we don't give you certain leniencies, then you just won't do it. Again, we're not assuming people are bad, we're assuming people are human, and therefore it's going to at least cause some a little bit of hesitation. Oh, maybe someone else could do it, right? In other words, no one's going to say like, oh, let the person die, right? But the point is that if you don't, we need to make it very, very simple for the person to be able to go back to their original state, because if not, there's a concern that a person's not going to be as motivated to go ahead and do what they have to do. Okay, so that principle is laid out in our Mishnah. The Mishnah is first going to discuss a very particular, question, and then tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem, we'll get back into that question of, Hatzalah drivers or people traveling for lifesaving, whatever, any life-saving purpose, and what they're allowed to do after they go. Of course, life-saving, no question. The question is what you're allowed to do after that, and the recognition of human nature, and therefore certain dispensations for that. So let's begin our Mishnah. So Mishi Yatzu B'Rishus, the person leaves their tchum with legal permission, again, to go establish a new moon, to go save a life, etc. V'amru lo, and they tell him on the way, Kvar nasa maisa, it's already been taken care of. In other words, you see a Hatzalah car driving, and they stop the Hatzalah car, they're like, oh, by the way, I already coming from that area, the police made it there, the EMTs made it there, he's fine. Nonetheless, yeshlo alpayim ama l'chol ruach. The person where they are has a new tchum, 2,000 amos in every direction. Okay, right. In other words, even though the person may be beyond the tchum now, even though they haven't even saved the life, but they went to go save the life. And now they find out, it's already been taken care of. No problem. You have 2,000 amos in each direction. Okay? If the person was still within the tchum, ki'ilu la yatsa, it's as if they never left. And that line is a little bit funny. We're going to come back and spend a little bit of time defining that line, right? What does that line mean? If you didn't leave the tchum, if you're part of your original tchum, then it's as if you never left the tchum, meaning you're able to travel within that. It sounds like you're able to travel within your original tchum. Like, of course. And in other words, if you didn't leave your tchum, forget life saving. If you didn't leave your tchum, you still have your tchum, obviously. So what is that teaching us? We'll come back to Kol hayotzim lahatzil. And this is the line we're going to analyze tomorrow. Kol hayotzim lahatzil chozran limkom. Anyone who leaves to rescue people is allowed to return to their place. Now, again, the discussion of the Mishnah is tchum, but we'll see it has ramifications for more than tchum. Nowadays, again, your Atzala call is not going beyond tchum, but they certainly do have some other violations that would be relevant. And so this principle of anyone who goes to save is allowed to go back to their place will have ramifications. Okay, so first let's go back to that line, which is a little cryptic. What is the meaning of the words in the Mishnah which said that if a person leaves the tchum, it's as if he never left? Okay, so that seems right. Of course, if the person's still within their tchum, then of course the person never left. Amar Rabba, hachi gamar. If a person's within their tchum, the original tchum, it's as if they never left their house. Again, and the Gemara asks again, pshita, that's obvious. So Ma'udatema, the Gemara says, I would have thought hoel va'akar akar. That since the person left his house, right? In other words, you start your tchum. A person starts Shabbos. Again, their house is over here. I'm going to start this pictures over here because we have another picture soon. You're starting house, so they have 2,000 amos. Okay, and now they stopped over here. Person now finds out, the person's been saved. Okay, so you would have thought that then now get 2,000 amos from here. And Rabbah says no. The Mishnah is teaching us that if you're still within your tchum, then you just are part of your original tchum, but you don't get a new tchum. That's what it's coming to teach me. That's how Rabbah learns it, right? That hova akar, since you left for a good reason, then you're going to get a new tchum. Now you have 2,000 amos in. Now you have 2,000 amos. Gemara says, and Kamash Malan. No, since you're in your original 2,000 amos, you still get your original tchum. Okay. Rav Shimi Bar Chia Amar, he says a different answer. Haki Amar. He says as follows. He says, let's say you went. Okay. You have your original tchum, and you went over here, and then you come, so you're past your tchum, but you stop over here, right? And if you find it over here that the person's saved, and now you have a new tchum which goes within 2,000 amos. There's overlap, right? So because there's overlap, what Rav Shimi says, what you're allowed to do is you're allowed to go back to your original tchum and then have this original tchum all back for you. Okay? That's what Rav Shimi understands. In other words, Rabbah says what the Mishnah is teaching us is that as long as I'm still over here, then I don't get a new tchum, going in each direction. Rather, I'm still part of my original tchum. Rav Shimi says, no, we're talking about a case where you left your tchum and there's overlap, you're allowed to go back into your original place. That's what the Mishnah is coming to teach me. Okay? So Gemara says, what are the arguments? Mar Savar Havlas Tchumin Milsahi. Rav Shimi holds that once there's an overlap of Tchumin, then it becomes one joint section, and now I have this whole space, and I'm allowed to go all the way back. Even though I just got a new tchum of 2,000 amos, I'm allowed, because they overlap, I'm allowed to go back into my original tchum. That's havlas tchumin, meaning the overlap of tchumin become a legal, a one entity. Umar Savar La Milsahi. And Rabbah would hold that no, in this case, I am not able to go back. Right? That's what they're arguing about. They're arguing about when you have overlap of tchumin, are you now allowed to go back into your original tchum, or do we say no? Since this is a new, so the second opinion says once they overlap, I'm allowed to go back into this place, and it's all considered one space. Rabbah says no, I now have a new tchum, and I'm not allowed to go back into it just because it overlaps the other place. I'm not allowed to go back into it. Make sense? Okay. Amarle Abaya l'Rabba. Abaya says to Rabbah. Again, Rabbah was the opinion that says I'm not allowed to go back to the original place. He does not hold of the what's the term? The overlap of tchumin. The Atlo Tispra. Don't you agree? On page 44b. 3. That the overlap of tchumin is a legally recognized principle. Why? What's the case? I'm going to draw a picture in a second. A person begins Shabbos in a cave where the interior of the cave is 4,000 amos. Okay, and on top of the roof there is slightly less than 4,000 amos. Okay, lo nimtza mahaliches kula v'chutzla payim ama. Are you not allowed to go above the entire? You're allowed to go throughout the entire cave and on top of the cave and 2,000 amos beyond it. Okay, so what does this mean? Like this. Okay, so basically you have a cave. Okay, this is this is the grounds. This is the grounds. Okay, opening, and then you have cave. Okay, okay, this is your cave, and you start Shabbos over here. Person starts Shabbos over here. This space is let's see. Okay, this is okay. This whole space. Let's just call it 3,898 amos, just for fun. It's less than 4,000 amos. So now I come out on time. So now there's like two entrances to two exits from my cave. Okay. So I start Shabbos over here. This space itself is 4,000 amos. Okay, fine. I have these. These are my two exits. So really, from each exit, I'm going to have 2,000 amos in each direction because they both are the places that I come out. They're 2,000 amos. Now there's 2,000 amos overlapping. There's over here. There's overlap from the place that I come out on each side. Right? There's overlap on each side, and I'm allowed to walk this whole area. Now, why am I allowed to walk this whole area? Because even though it's two separate tchumen, they overlap. Right? Because it's less than 2,000 of each, right? Because 3,898, I'm sorry for the random number, but the point is that it's less than 2,000 amos in each direction, so they connect, they create one space, and I'm allowed to walk from one to the other, right? So he says, everyone agrees in this case, where I started Shabbos, over here, and so I have these two entrances are considered where my tchum begins on each side, and therefore on the top of the cave, which everyone agrees I'm allowed to walk, is you have less than 2,000 amos of each. It overlaps, and it's considered one space, and I'm allowed to walk from one to the other. So you see that the overlap of tchumen exists. Make sense? So the Gemara says, what are you talking about? So Rabbah says, yeah, of course. This case is fine because this case, you actually were surrounded by walls. You were surrounded in a proper entity when Shabbos began. There I agree that the overlapping mechitzos, the overlapping tchumen does apply. What's our case? Our case is where I left an enclosed area on Shabbos, and I'm now in the middle of nowhere, right? I'm beyond the tchum, and now you're asking me to create these overlapping tchumen. Who says it applies with it? In other words, whenever you start within a surrounded area, has much more substance to your resting. And so over here, you start in your cave, you start in the surrounded area, and you get these two proper tchumen, and they overlap, and they create one shared entity. Yeah, in this case, it's true. The overlapping does work. But in our case, what's our case? Our case, I started Shabbos in my house, right? And then I go over here to go save someone. I'm in the middle of nowhere. Who says... Okay, great, very important picture over here. This demonstrates everything. But the point is, how is this case, so there's a new tchum over here. The new tchum is a freestanding tchum. It's not a tchum that's surrounded by a house, not a tchum that's surrounded by a cave, and therefore, whatever principles apply over here, who says they apply over here? So that's where Rabbah rejects it. Ask the Gemara further. Vehecha de lo Shabbos lo. Is that so that only when a place, when you started Shabbos in a place that provides with the two tchum areas, in other words, over here, where it's already, you started Shabbos with the surrounded area, and you already had your two tchums, only there do you have the overlap? Is that so? 45a1. V'atznan was taught in the Mishnah. Rabbi Eliezer omer shtayim yikanis, shalosh lo yikanis. Okay, Rabbi Eliezer has the following case. Whatever, fine. Rabbi Eliezer has a case where I leave my tchum, and I now have, and we spoke about this before, I have 2 amos beyond my tchum, 2 amos freebie. Okay? So I leave my tchum. We said if you leave your tchum, you can't go back into your tchum. If I'm traveling on Shabbos and by mistake, right, I'm the absent-minded, the absent-minded students who are walking around thinking to themselves, and they leave their tchum, they're outside, 5 amos outside their tchum, sorry, you're stuck for Shabbos, unless someone comes up with a shtick with the people not being aware. But the bottom line is, you're stuck. Rabbi Eliezer says you have a 2 amma, dispensation. Okay, where does this come from? So my love, Rabbi Eliezer l'tamei, is it not Rabbi Eliezer this is his own opinion, based on his own opinion about something else? D'amar v'hu b'emtza'an, who says that the 4 amos that a person has, the person is in the middle of them. Okay, so like this. In other words, we pointed out earlier that when a person leaves their tchum, how much space do they have? They have to just sit down? No, they have 4 amos. And Rabbi Eliezer holds you have 4. You are in the center of your 4 amos. Meaning, if all of a sudden I find myself on Shabbos day and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm outside my tchum. So how do I measure these 4 amos? Rabbi Eliezer says 2 amos here, 2 amos there, right? So now we can understand why Rabbi Eliezer says it's not you just get like 2 amos freebie. It's actually the reason you get 2 amos is because if I catch myself 2 amos outside the tchum, and now I have 4 amos, 2 amos on each side, so my new space, my new tchum, it's a 4 amma tchum, it's a 4 amma space, actually is flush with the tchum, and that's why I'm allowed to go back in. And what is that? That is a case of havla. That's a case of 2 overlapping tchumen. Over here, it's side by side without any gap between them, right? Again, I am beyond my tchum. My tchum ends over here, right? And sorry, picture, whatever. And I'm standing over here, so I have 2 amos on each side. So, right, so my tchum, my new place over here now says, oh, I'm allowed to go all the way up to here. And since I'm allowed to go up to here, and it's adjacent to the regular tchum, I go back into the tchum. That is also a case of havla, where the two spaces connect. So my love, and the 4 amos that he was given are as if they're overlapped. In other words, over here it's not overlapped; they are adjacent. The kamar yikanis, your says you let it go in. Alma havlas tchum and mosahi. So you see, when there's overlap or when there's adjacency between 2 spaces, then it works. So Amalei Rabba Barchana Labaye. Rabba Barchana replies to Abaye, Rabbi Eliezer Kamosiv Lamar. What kind of challenge is this? No one agrees with Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer is a das yachid; he's a minority opinion. So Shkayach, Rabbi Eliezer says that you have havla, that you have the adjacency of that when 2 tchumen are overlapped, you're allowed to go from one to another. But he's the das yachid. The chacham disagree with him. The majority opinion disagrees. What kind of proof is that? Amalei in. Abaye says no. It is a good proof. Why? The shmiya lemine damar, because I heard Rabbah himself say ad kan lo pli rabbanan leder Eliezer el dvar hashus v'advar mitzvah module, that there is that really the chachamim agree to Rabbi Eliezer that really when you're 2 amos out, you're allowed to go back in, and really they agree, they both say this in the case of a mitzvah, meaning if I leave for the sake of a mitzvah, then I do have this the 2 amos. It's just that in a case where it's not a mitzvah purpose, then they say, Rabbi Eliezer, we're not going to go so far. But you see that at least in principle they agree. In other words, in a mitzvah case where a person went out to the side of the tchum to go help someone, they went for a dvar mitzvah, and now they're 2 amos outside the Rosh Hashanah, outside the tchum, and the 2 amos, right, there's only 2 amos out, there the chacham agree that you'd be allowed to go back. So, so basically the point is that they agree in principle to Rabbi Eliezer, and in any case of a mitzvah, they would agree that your 2 amos adjacent to the tchum, even that because they overlap or because they touch one another, you'd be allowed to go back. They happen to agree in a case of rishus, but the point is that in principle, they do agree, and that's why it's a good question. And the Gemara leaves this off as a question, seemingly supporting the notion of havla, seemingly supporting the fact that when you have when the 2 tchumen are overlap or they're adjacent, then it would be you'd be allowed to go from one to another. Again, tomorrow we're going to pick up on Hatzalah calls. We'll pick up then. Have a great day.